Hi, I'm Adam and welcome back to First Man Photography, where in today's video we are looking at the worst photography advice ever given. It's the sort of stuff that boils my blood, but we're going to use that fire and turn it into a positive, creative energy. Before we get going today though, this video is sponsored by Lexar. If you need fast, reliable and high quality memory cards, look no further than Lexar. I've been much more active on Twitter over the last few months, so make sure you are following me there. But I recently saw a post from a young photographer asking experienced and professional photographers for their best bit of advice. As you can imagine, it got a lot of engagement because if you give a guy a chance to drop some knowledge on Twitter, they're not going to hold back. There was one that really stood out though from a guy who was so very, very certain of the advice he was dishing out, which I always think is a bit of a red flag anyway. But he said, specialise as soon as you can, ignore the noise and go all in on that. Now, just in life generally, I think this is terrible advice, especially when you're young. It should be a time to try lots of new things, explore ideas, and find out what you're good at, what you enjoy, and then do that. I think it's a consequence of the lie we've been telling children for the last 20 plus years by saying, you can be whatever you want to be. No, you can't. Most of you will be shit at maths, and nearly all of you will suck at football. It's a particularly bad idea though when you first get into photography, because if you only do landscape photography, for example, then you would miss out on the enjoyment of macro, which you might have seen in last week's video. More importantly, the photography skills you learn along the way transcend genre. There's no doubt in my mind that taking portraits and doing wedding photography made me a better landscape photographer, because the technical skills, the artistic principles and artistic elements are all the same. With professional photography, specialising too much has proven to be bad advice time and time again. When I left the police to become a full-time photographer, it was a big risk because I had 2 young children, a mortgage, and people depending on me. And I wanted to make sure that I had a diverse business that includes these videos that could ride out any significant events in the economy. Then the pandemic hit and the plan was absolutely put to the test. Thankfully, I survived, but I'm a big believer in diversify or die, and things are not going to get any easier over the next few years. That's not to say that you should never specialise though. I now only market myself as a landscape photographer, but I also say I'm a filmmaker. You can market yourself however you want, but it can help if your website or portfolio has a consistency or cohesion. You, the photographer, and you, the business, are not necessarily the same thing though. You can project outwardly just one part of what you do as a business whilst dabbling with other stuff on the side. People like to pigeonhole and categorize, and this is especially true with marketing and advertising people if you're looking to do commercial photography. Still, be careful. If you go all in on one thing, that's a bigger risk. And if that thing suddenly disappears, you could be vulnerable. Stock photography springs to mind here. After doing photography for a number of years, it's pretty common to start thinking about trying to make a bit of money from it. Now, this is still absolutely possible, but it's becoming more difficult as time goes on. It's nerve-wracking too, and can often feel easier at first to not charge anything, but then you read or hear from another pro that you should never work for free. I think this is bad advice because it is never followed up with anything constructive, so it really comes across as a pro photographer who is insecure and worried that their client paying $4,000 for a shoot is gonna be taken away somehow by a beginner working for free. That's not how it works. It's totally reasonable to start building your career, portfolio, and experience by doing jobs for free. This is not undermining the market or undercutting another photographer. It's just business. You do have to be careful though, because it can become all too easy to get a reputation as the guy or girl who does photography for free, and that can be tricky to get out of. With the first couple of weddings I ever did, I essentially did it for free, but just charged them for expenses, which was usually around the £500 mark. This is a tactic I still use today for my commercial work, where you essentially offer a discount so you can give a lower price but still show what your true value is. So for example, I did some work for a very well-known charity not so long ago, and their budget was tight. It was a new client though, and I desperately wanted to do the work because it was an exciting job. So when I put my quote together, I laid out all my usual fees and then offered a discount to meet their budget, which in this case was 85%. It works because it also makes them feel like you're doing them a big favor. Pricing yourself is hard though, but as more jobs come in, you can start to raise your prices because clients essentially begin to compete for your time and your services. As things have progressed for me, and especially once I went full time, I've found it particularly important to also be willing to turn a job down if it's not worth my while. Right, this is a more general one to cover all that advice out there that says don't do this, don't do that, you should do this, you should do that, don't shoot in manual, you should only shoot in manual. It gets very tiring. But I guess we're all fallible, so we probably have all done it at some point. What's much more annoying, though, are the people acting like they are the gatekeepers. They say stupid stuff like, you're not a proper landscape photographer if you don't use a tripod or don't use filters. They tell you not to shoot the popular locations and suggest that your work has no value because it's not unique. This insistence that everything good has to be original is very annoying. Use music as an example. There's loads of great songs that use the same 4-chord progression, and I don't think photography is any different. We're bringing elements together that just work. I got told online the other day that I am a mediocre photographer. He didn't stop there though and said that proper professional photographers don't have time to make YouTube videos. And if I wanted to improve, I had to stop making them. Thankfully, these people are not the gatekeepers, and anyone that pertains to be is often not acting in our best interest. We can discover a lot about a person's intentions in the language they use delivering advice or critique. It's essentially encourage versus discourage. Is the advice to help you, or is it just to make them feel important? I hope by now that you know this channel is all about trying to encourage, inspire, and be positive about photography, even when, or especially when, the titles are like this one. We've got 2 more to look at, but before we move on to the next one, as you know, this video is sponsored by Lexar. Now, I have been using Lexar cards for years, and they have never let me down, even when I clumsily bash them around and accidentally drown them in a Welsh lake. They are fast, they are reliable, and they are high quality, and they make cards to suit all your needs. One of my favorites is this one. It's the Lexar Professional 1800X. It does exactly what you want from a memory card. You just stick it in, start taking pictures, and forget about it because they come in a range of capacities. It's fast for all your 4K footage and high burst rate stills and has very solid performance. So hit the link down below and check out Lexar, and particularly the Lexar Professional 1800X, and give them some love for supporting this channel. So the next one is that an image has to be technically perfect, and this comes really in various forms, such as people insisting on complete front to back sharpness, perfect exposure, and rejecting images with even the slightest bit of noise. Where this is particularly terrible advice is when it's delivered to beginner photographers. So much of photography education is based around the technical aspects and often completely forgets to teach about the artistic side of things. I've been focusing on this a lot recently because I'm sure we've all seen technically perfect images that are complete rubbish, and I know for a fact I definitely shot a few myself. Whatever stage you're at though, I would encourage you to take risks and make mistakes, both artistically and technically. Over the autumn, I created a technical challenge for myself with a new project using the drone to light the scene from above, and I made loads of errors, including not realizing my lens had fogged up once it got dark, but I actually really like the effect that it created in the final image. Here's another couple of examples that are actually two of my favourite images. This one of my favourite lone tree that's featured on the channel a number of times before. The technical critics might have a problem with the movement captured in the leaves, but for me that matches the mood and breathes some life into that graceful little tree. This one of the lighthouse that I shot in the middle of a thunderstorm, it was getting really dark, and to capture that beam of light in that way required a very specific shutter speed. So I had to bump the ISO all the way up to 3200. It's far from being technically perfect, but I love it. So I would definitely encourage you to aim for technical perfection, but I would hate it to come at the cost of the artistic creation, and more importantly, your actual enjoyment of making the image. One bit of advice that I find most unbearable is work smarter, not harder. To be honest, I don't really know what this means, but with photography, I think it comes in the form of photo hacks, TikToks, and Insta stories. I don't think you can learn photography by watching 15-second videos. From a business point of view, I think it's all sort of stupid. I feel like much of my success has come from working as smartly as I'm capable of, but then putting in as much energy as possible and outworking the next guy. Big breaks don't exist either. It's about practice, hard work, persistence, and then a lot of patience. But for all photographers, this should be exciting. We're lucky because we get to spend our time in such a positive way. Whilst the world seems to be imploding around us, we can go out, grab our cameras and escape it, or face it head on, but through the shield of our lens. It's what I love about nature photography too, because we get to explore the landscape and show people all the beauty that still remains. We get to have fun, we get to be creative, and for me, that will always give me strength and hope. So if you want to support the channel, hear some crazy stories about my time in the police and look at some mediocre photography, then head down to the link below and pick up a copy of my book. You rock. See ya.